ExamPrep.School. Wyoming Pre-Need Funeral Limited Lines. Insurance Producer Exam Code 12-WY-92 or OPWY92. There are 6 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Contract law, funeral contract trust funds, Wyoming statutes, rules, and regulations. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Under Wyoming section 26-32-101, which of the following specific items is required on the statutory form for a funeral pre-need contract offer? A. The purchaser's Social Security number. B. The funeral director license expiration date. C. The name and address of the trust institution holding contract funds. D. The marital status of the designated beneficiary. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is C. The statutory form must identify the trust institution by name and address, whereas the purchaser's Social Security number, license expiration date, and beneficiary marital status are not mandated by Section 26-32-101. Reason A is not correct. Social Security number is not among the form requirements specified by Section 26-32-101. Reason B is not correct. License expiration date is not a mandated element on the statutory offer form. Reason D is not correct. Beneficiary marital status is not required by the statute for the form. Question 2. Under Wyoming law, which of the following actions constitutes acceptance of a funeral pre-need contract offer? A. Funeral home's receipt of a signed contract without payment. B. Receipt by the designated trust institution of the required trust funds. C. Purchaser's oral consent given to the funeral director. D. Electronic receipt of the contract PDF by the purchaser via email. The correct answer is B. Acceptance occurs when the required funds are received and acknowledged by the designated trust institution. Signature alone, oral consent, or email receipt do not affect acceptance under Wyoming law. Reason A is not correct. Signing without payment does not fulfill the deposit requirement for acceptance. Reason C is not correct. Oral consent is not sufficient to accept a pre-need contract under Wyoming statute. Reason D is not correct. Electronic receipt by the purchaser does not constitute acceptance. Question 3. Jeremy enters into a prepaid funeral service agreement by paying a $3,000 initial down payment and agreeing to pay $150 monthly until the full amount is paid. Under Wyoming contract law for prepaid funeral services, which element constitutes the consideration provided by Jeremy? A. The funeral home's guarantee to lock in today's service prices. B. The $3,000 down payment and Jeremy's promise to make $150 monthly payments. C. Specification of the casket type in the agreement. D. The transferability of the contract to Jeremy's heirs. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is the down payment and promise of future monthly payments, as consideration must be a bargained-for exchange from the contracting party. Reason A is not correct. The guarantee to lock in prices is the funeral home's obligation, not Jeremy's exchange of value. Reason C is not correct. Listing contract terms like casket type is not a bargained-for exchange by Jeremy. Reason D is not correct. Transfer rights are contractual provisions, not Jeremy's consideration. Question 4. Pinecrest Funeral Home sends Mariah a written service agreement outlining specified funeral arrangements. Mariah signs and returns the document, and Pinecrest then decorates the burial plot and publishes an obituary. Which fact best evidences mutual assent to the contract? A. Mariah's signature on the returned contract. B. Pinecrest's decoration of the burial plot and obituary publication. C. Mariah's advance deposit payment to Pinecrest. D. Pinecrest's prior distribution of its service brochure. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is the funeral home's performance through decorating and publication, as acceptance by conduct establishes mutual assent. Reason A is not correct. A signature alone shows offer acceptance by Mariah but does not reflect the funeral home's acceptance. Reason C is not correct. An advanced payment indicates intent but does not alone demonstrate acceptance by the funeral home. Reason D is not correct. Providing a brochure is an invitation to negotiate, not evidence of mutual assent. Question 5. Which statement accurately distinguishes a bilateral pre-need funeral service agreement from a unilateral one? A. A bilateral agreement involves mutual promises between the funeral provider and the purchaser, whereas a unilateral agreement obligates only the provider once the purchaser performs a specified act. B. A unilateral agreement requires mutual promises, but binds only the purchaser until the provider delivers services. C. A bilateral agreement binds both parties immediately upon signature regardless of performance conditions. D. A unilateral agreement allows either party to withdraw without breaching any obligation. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that a bilateral agreement is supported by mutual promises, while a unilateral agreement creates obligations for only one party after performance. Reason B is not correct. Describes an incorrect role reversal and misstates which party is bound. Reason C is not correct. Mislabels the timing of obligations and ignores the need for performance to create a unilateral obligation. Reason D is not correct. Creates a withdrawal right that does not reflect either contract classification. Question 6. In pre-need funeral contract terminology, a contract in which the purchaser has paid a deposit but the funeral provider has not yet rendered any services is classified as which of the following? A. Executory contract. B. Executed contract. C. Unilateral contract. D. Quasi-contractual obligation created by law. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that a contract remains executory until both parties fulfill their obligations. Partial performance does not convert it to executed. Reason B is not correct. Describes a contract that has had all obligations performed, which does not apply to partial performance. Reason C is not correct. Refers to a contract formed by one promise in exchange for an act, not the status of performance. Reason D is not correct. Quasi-contract is an equitable remedy, not a classification of actual pre-need funeral contracts. Question 7. Under Wyoming funeral insurance definitions, which example represents an executed pre-need funeral contract? A. A funeral service where the purchaser has paid in full and the provider has delivered all contracted services. B. A contract in which the purchaser has paid a deposit and the provider has scheduled services to be performed later. C. An agreement signed with payment deferred until the purchaser's death. D. A contract canceled by mutual consent before any services are rendered. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that an executed contract is one in which all obligations have been completely fulfilled by both parties. Reason B is not correct. Describes partial performance with outstanding obligations, so it remains executory. Reason C is not correct. Payment deferral does not indicate completion of the contract's obligations. Reason D is not correct. Cancellation prior to performance prevents any contract from becoming executed. Question 8. During a pre-need funeral sale negotiation, the funeral home presents a written agreement affixed with the company's corporate seal and acknowledged by a notary public, which the purchaser signs. Under common law, this contract is best classified as which of the following? A. Informal contract, enforceable only if supported by separate consideration. B. Implied in fact contract, created by the parties' conduct rather than express terms. C. Contract under seal that carries a presumption of consideration. D. Quasi-contractual obligation imposed by equity to prevent unjust enrichment. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is contract under seal, since the presence of a corporate seal, and notarization classifies it as a formal contract under common law, carrying a presumption of consideration without requiring additional consideration. Reason A is not correct. An informal contract lacks the formal seal and notarization, and therefore does not carry the presumption of consideration. Reason B is not correct. An implied in fact contract arises from actions or conduct, not from a written agreement bearing a seal and notarial acknowledgement. Reason D is not correct. A quasi-contractual obligation is a court-imposed remedy for unjust enrichment, not an actual contract executed by the parties. Question 9. Under Wyoming statutory provisions governing funeral service contracts, which circumstance will render such a contract void ab initio? A. Agreement that omits the statutorily required trust account clause. B. Execution by a person adjudicated as mentally incompetent. C. Contract entered into by an individual under 17 years of age. D. Consent to provide supplementary floral services at a funeral. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is the scenario in which a person has been adjudicated mentally incompetent, because capacity is a fundamental requirement for contract formation, and adjudicated incompetence negates any legal effect from inception. Reason A is not correct. Omitting the trust account clause makes the contract unenforceable in part, but does not void it from inception. Reason C is not correct. A minor's contract is generally voidable at the minor's election, not void ab initio. Reason D is not correct. Adding floral services is lawful and does not affect the contract's validity. Question 10. Which of the following describes duress sufficient to render consent to a funeral services agreement voidable under Wyoming contract law? A. Signer influenced by the funeral director's close personal relationship. B. Signer misled about the statutory requirements for trust disbursement. C. Signer fatigued after an extended negotiation period. D. Signer threatened with bodily harm if the contract is not executed. The correct answer is D. The correct answer involves a threat of bodily harm, which is a classic form of duress that vitiates consent and makes the agreement voidable, while the other options describe mistake, fatigue, or undue influence. Reason A is not correct. Undue influence involves excessive persuasion, not a threat of harm. Reason B is not correct. Being misled about regulations constitutes mistake, not duress. Reason C is not correct. Fatigue may affect capacity but does not constitute duress. Question 11. During negotiations for a pre-need funeral contract, the funeral home representative knowingly tells the purchaser that no additional fees will ever apply for embalming or related services, intending to induce the purchaser to sign. After the contract is executed, the purchaser is billed for an embalming fee. Under Wyoming contract law, what is the most likely effect of this conduct on the enforceability of the contract? A. The contract is voidable due to fraudulent inducement if the purchaser justifiably relied on the false statement and suffered a pecuniary loss. B. The contract remains enforceable because the purchaser is presumed to have read the contract's fee provisions before signing. C. The contract is void ab initio because any misstatement by a funeral home representative automatically invalidates a pre-need contract. D. The contract remains enforceable unless the misrepresentation was set forth in writing and signed by the purchaser. The correct answer is A. Knowing false statements about material fees made to induce signing render the contract voidable for fraud in the inducement when there is justifiable reliance and actual loss. Reason B is not correct. Presumption of reading does not bar a claim for fraudulent inducement when the purchaser was misled about material terms. Reason C is not correct. Fraudulent inducement makes a contract voidable, not void ab initio. Void ab initio requires illegality of the subject matter. Reason D is not correct. A misrepresentation need not be in writing to support a voidable fraud claim if it induced justifiable reliance. Question 12. A funeral planner verbally describes the burial vault in a pre-need agreement as being constructed of reinforced steel. In fact, the vault is made of fiberglass. The purchaser signs the agreement relying on that description, but could have inspected a model vault on site. Under Wyoming law, what is the most likely effect of this misrepresentation on contract enforceability? A. The contract is unenforceable because any misrepresentation regarding vault material renders pre-need agreements void ab initio. B. The contract is voidable due to material misrepresentation, even though the purchaser had inspection opportunities. C. The contract is enforceable because the purchaser could have verified the vault's material by inspection. D. The contract is enforceable only if the misrepresentation appears in the written contract itself. The correct answer is C. Because the purchaser had the opportunity to verify the vault's material, reliance was not justifiable, so the misrepresentation does not make the contract voidable. Reason A is not correct. Fraud renders a contract voidable, not void ab initio, and only if reliance is justifiable. Reason B is not correct. Justifiable reliance is required for voidable fraud. Inspection opportunity defeats reliance. Reason D is not correct. A misrepresentation need not be in writing to affect enforceability, but reliance must be justifiable. Question 13. In the context of a funeral insurance application under Wyoming law, what best defines a representation made by the applicant? A. A promise to perform future duties under the policy. B. A guarantee by the insurer regarding claim payment timing. C. A statement of fact by the applicant that the insurer relies on when issuing coverage. D. A condition that must be met before the policy becomes effective. The correct answer is C. A representation is a factual statement provided by the applicant that the insurer relies on to evaluate risk and decide whether to issue the policy. Reason A is not correct. A promise to perform future duties is an undertaking or warranty, not a representation of present fact. Reason B is not correct. A guarantee by the insurer concerns the insurer's obligations, not the applicant's factual statements. Reason D is not correct. A condition precedent relates to policy activation, not a representation made by the applicant. Question 14. Under Wyoming law, when is a false representation in a funeral insurance application considered material? A. When the applicant intended to deceive the insurer. B. Only if it increased the applicant's premium by a specified percentage. C. When it would have influenced the insurer's underwriting decision or the terms offered. D. Whenever any untrue statement, regardless of its impact, is discovered. The correct answer is C. A false representation is material if it would have affected the insurer's decision to accept the risk or the terms under which coverage is provided. Reason A is not correct. Intent to deceive is relevant to fraud, but not the test for materiality of a misstatement. Reason B is not correct. Materiality is based on impact on the insurer's decision or terms, not on a fixed premium threshold. Reason D is not correct. Not every incorrect statement is material. Materiality depends on its effect on the insurer's decision. Question 15. A pre-need funeral insurance contract included an express warranty about the insured's health status. After services were rendered, the insurer discovered that the insured had knowingly misrepresented a serious medical condition. What consequence may the insured lawfully invoke for the warranty breach? A. Rescind the contract ab initio and require restitution of all premiums paid. B. Void future coverage only and retain premiums to offset underwriting losses. C. Unilaterally amend the policy terms and demand retroactive higher premiums. D. Continue coverage but reduce benefit payments as a contractual penalty. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that breach of an express warranty permits the insurer to rescind the contract from inception and seek restitution of premiums, thereby unwinding the contract and restoring both parties to their pre-contract positions. Reason B is not correct. An insurer cannot limit rescission to future coverage. Warranty breach allows voiding the entire contract rather than offsetting only future obligations. Reason C is not correct. The insurer lacks authority to alter policy terms or impose retroactive premium adjustments as a remedy for breach of warranty. Reason D is not correct. A warranty breach does not compel continued coverage with reduced benefits. It instead authorizes contract rescission and premium restitution. Question 16. Under Wyoming law, what authority does the insurance commissioner have to promulgate rules governing the limited per-need funeral insurance line? A. Issue only emergency rules without prior notice specifically for pre-need funeral insurance matters. B. Promulgate rules only with prior legislative approval for pre-need funeral insurance regulations. C. Adopt, amend, or repeal rules after public hearings to implement the insurance code, including pre-need funeral insurance. D. Require joint committee endorsement before amending any pre-need funeral insurance rules. The correct answer is C. The insurance commissioner is empowered by statute to adopt, amend, or repeal rules after public hearings to carry out the provisions of the insurance code, which expressly includes the pre-need funeral limited line. Reason A is not correct. Emergency rules are allowed only in immediate risk situations, not as the sole means of rulemaking. Premiums vary annually based on the insurer's mortality experience during the payment term. Reason D is not correct. No joint committee endorsement is mandated for rule amendments in the pre-need funeral line. Question 17. According to WS Section 26-2-110, how often must the insurance commissioner examine the financial condition of every insurer authorized in Wyoming? A. At least once every 3 years. B. At least once every 5 years. C. Annually. D. At least once every 10 years. The correct answer is B. WS Section 26-2-110 requires that the commissioner perform examinations of each insurer at least once every 5 years to assess financial solvency and regulatory compliance. Reason A is not correct. 3-year intervals are more frequent than required by the statute. Reason C is not correct. Annual examinations are not mandated for every insurer under this provision. Reason D is not correct. 10-year intervals exceed the maximum allowable period specified in the statute. Question 18. Prior to issuing a cease and desist order for unfair trade practices, the insurance commissioner must A. Obtain a court injunction against the accused party. B. Serve written notice specifying the alleged violations and hearing date. C. Refer the matter to the Attorney General without providing notice. D. Require the respondent to post a surety bond before any hearing. The correct answer is B. Statute mandates that the commissioner serve a written notice detailing the alleged unfair trade practice violations and set a hearing date before issuing a cease and desist order. Reason A is not correct. A court injunction is not a prerequisite for a commissioner's cease and desist order. Reason C is not correct. Referral without notice bypasses the due process requirement in the statute. Reason D is not correct. Posting a bond is not required before the administrative hearing. Question 19. Under Wyoming insurance statutes, what is the maximum administrative fine the commissioner may impose for each violation of the insurance code? A. $5,000 per violation. B. $2,500 per violation. C. $1,000 per violation. D. No fine for first offense only. The correct answer is A. The statute authorizes the commissioner to impose administrative penalties not exceeding $5,000 for each insurance code violation. Reason B is not correct. $2,500 understates the maximum penalty that may be imposed per violation. Reason C is not correct. The allowable penalty exceeds $1,000 per violation under the statute. Reason D is not correct. There is no statutory waiver of fines for a first offense. Question 20. Which provision governs emergency suspension of a producer's license by the Wyoming Insurance Commissioner? A. The licensee may request a hearing within 5 business days after suspension. B. The suspension may remain in effect for up to 90 days without hearing. C. The commissioner must provide notice and hold a hearing within 30 days. D. The licensee is entitled to an administrative hearing within 15 days of service. The correct answer is D. Under the emergency suspension provisions, the commissioner must serve notice, and the licensee has the right to an administrative hearing within 15 days after service. Reason A is not correct. The statute specifies a 15-day period, not 5 business days. Reason B is not correct. A 90-day duration without hearing exceeds the statutory limit. Reason C is not correct. The required hearing period is 15 days, not 30 days. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below, we read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.